Today, we're going to kind of evaluate the objection and the role play concept. And I'm realizing that a lot of agents are running into a really specific problem. And it is that they're trying to solve the client's problem right out of the gate. So I have an analogy that I want to share that I think has been working really well with our current clients. And the idea here, and this is the analogy that we're going to be moving forward with for a while, is when a client gives an objection, they are telling you their starting point, where their mind is at right now. You, as the agent, need to get them to the finish line. But the way you're going to get them there is not by telling them or by rushing them to the finish line. It's by leaving breadcrumbs along the way that lead to that finish line. And we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit more. But again, here's kind of the layout here. Uh, Client gives an objection. This is what they currently believe. This is their perspective. Now, the finish line is where you want to get them to self discover and realize that maybe their perspective is not the best perspective. Maybe they're coming to a self realization that there is a better way to look at this situation. Now, the way you get them there, this is the key, is not by simply saying, well, that's incorrect and here's why, because there's no self discovery there. There's no ownership in that decision. Your job is to think where they're starting, where do you want them to end up, and now ask them questions that lead them towards that finish line. And I'm going to cover my butt here because a lot of people are going to say otherwise. This does not mean they're going to say yes. This does not mean they're going to take the action that they should be taking. You can only lead a horse to water. Some people are going to be presented, they're going to self realize to what is the best option, and they're still not going to make the best decision. That is not your decision to make. It's your job to educate them. So let's continue with this analogy here. So here's an example. Client, I want to wait until rates come down. This is what the agent may say. Actually, now is a great time to buy because, and then they're going to lay out A, B, C, D, E, F, and this is all why you're wrong and why I'm right, and this is why this is the best decision. And all you're doing is you're putting the client on the defense, and you can kind of see the little animation here that the agent, almost as if they're crossing their arms, like, well, this is why that's not correct. As soon as you say that, the client is going to cross their arms and say, well, this is why I think I'm right. Now, there's actually a way you can ask questions that still make this happen. And the worst question you can ask a client is why. Because as soon as you ask why, they're going to start defending themselves. And the more you explain, the more they protect their original position. So as soon as you start saying things like, well, historically, interest rates used to be at 17%, they're immediately now going to go into the defensive that says, well, yeah, but it could do this, or they're immediately going to go across the table from you, and it's going to turn into an adversarial situation. Okay, now, and I'm just going to read this one word for word. Your goal is not to prove the client wrong; it's to create enough curiosity for them to reconsider their own point. So let's give you some examples. Okay. Um, the example, I want to wait until interest rates drop. Now I am already going to think of what finish line do I want them to get to. So for example, I want them to evaluate and understand the cost of waiting. That's the finish line. I've decided that's where I'm going to take them. Let's say a different objection. Let's say they want to work with a listing agent only. I already know that in my finish line, I'm going to get them to understand that the listing agent may not have their best interests in mind. I'm not going to tell them that, but that's the finish line we're going to go to. So here's an example of a bad finish line. They should buy today. I told them they should buy today. Or the other example, I told them the listing agent isn't going to work hard for them. It's not a good idea. A good finish line is they self realize the risk of potentially waiting. Or in my other example, they self realize that maybe the listing agent is going to be loyal to the seller and not to them. So here's how we do that, right? So I'm going to skip forward one slide and I want you to just kind of see the visual here. So we're changing how we view objections. The objection is the starting line. I already know what I want them to land on, or what perspective I want them to understand. That's the finish line. So along the way, I need to leave breadcrumbs that build on the previous one and guide the client to the finish line. And I'm going to show you how we do that. We use what's called perspective changers. There's a great book called Exactly What to Say, and they basically give you these amazing, powerful questions and prompts that help change the perspective of the client. And now, again, you're not, and I already hear people saying this, that's manipulation. You're not manipulating them. All you're doing is getting them to potentially look at this differently. If after that they still decide on their original decision, then so be it. But you, as the agent, if you know the potential pitfalls of their plan and you don't change their perspective or expose them to a different perspective and you let them walk off that cliff, I would argue that you are hurting them by not having them go through these perspective changes. So let's use these examples. These are the 8 questions we always use, or 8 prompts. What do you understand? What is your experience? How important is it? Just imagine. How certain are you? Could it be possible? How would you feel if? And then the close is if then. And I always remind our agents, these are not in stone in this order. Many times you actually have to go back to a previous question if you need to. But something could be said like, well, what do you understand about what the listing agent's primary job is? And they may say, well, maybe I don't exactly understand that. Okay. And then you may say something like, well, what is your experience with purchasing in a 3% interest rate market? They may say 0. They may say that they've had experience with it. Now, again, this depends on where you're going. If in this example, we're talking about the listing agent, they want to work with the listing agent, and I say, what do you understand about what a listing agent's job is? I may help them out and say, well, are you aware, listing agent's job is to get the highest price possible. And then number 3, how important is it to you that you get the best price on this home? And you could say something like, remind me again, how important is it to you that you get this home? Now, just imagine. I love that question because that enables you to take them to a future pleasure or a future pain. And let me tell you exactly what that would look like. Just imagine you decide to work with the listing agent, and halfway through escrow, they're not really responding to you so much because they're responding to the seller. How would that make you feel? Or just imagine you choose to work with the buyer's agent, and that buyer's agent is going to bat for you, and they're trying to get some dollars knocked off the price, and they're trying to get repairs made. How would you feel if you had that person in your corner? Question number 5, how certain are you that working with the listing agent is the best course of action for you and your family? Or, interest rate example, how certain are you that interest rates aren't going to go down much more? Or, said another way, how certain are you that, or maybe I'll go to question 6. Could it be possible that there's hundreds of other buyers that are also waiting for interest rates to drop? Just imagine 50 new buyers enter the market when interest rates drop, and now you're one of 50 offers. How would that feel? Now remind me again, how important is it to you that you get the best price possible for this home? How would you feel if you waited until interest rates drop and now you're in a bidding war with 30 other offers? What would that do to the purchase price? Mr. Buyer, if I can show you how getting into the market now with less competition would give you the best price possible, then would you write an offer with me? Or if I can show you, what did we say? The listing agent. If I can show you that working with the buyer's agent, me specifically, we're able to get credits and repairs done, then would you work with me as your buyer's agent? That's the close. And again, this is the magic here. By the time you've asked them these questions, they started with, I'm waiting for interest rates to drop. Now, by the end of it, If you've done these questions correctly, they understand that, well, maybe it's not the best option to wait for interest rates to drop. Maybe I'll be competing with 50 other buyers. Maybe interest rates won't drop much more and I'm just wasting time and paying rent to somebody else. Now, I'm just going to read this part. Each question builds on the last, guiding the client to their own realization without pressure. So again, this is just kind of how you're going to be role playing this. Identify what the client believes. You're going to choose the finish line. And that may be the toughest thing for some people because you're going to have to kind of think quickly on your feet. If somebody says, we are waiting for the market to crash, you immediately have to start getting them to understand that self-realization, that finish line that you want them to get to. Okay. Or if you're a seller, I want to sell myself. I want to sell for sale by owner. My job, the finish line is going to be, hey, working with a professional real estate agent is going to get you the highest price possible. And the 3% that you're trying to save is going to be pennies compared to how much more you can make. Now, that's the finish line. Now, my questions are going to be breadcrumbs to get them to understand, well, maybe I really can't do this by myself. Maybe I should hire a professional for this. And it's almost comedic where you want to get them to the point where they arrive to the finish line and they think, I'm so I'm really glad I came to that realization that it's for the best that I work with the buyer's agent, or that I don't wait for interest rates to drop, or that I don't sell by myself. And you think to yourself, yeah, you know what, that was a good idea. I'm glad you thought of it. Right? That's kind of the idea behind this. So now here's the exercise. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to go too far. This is the exercise, and we're going to end with this because this is the role play exercise I think every agent should be practicing right now. You're going to get an objection. I don't care what the objection is. You're going to get an objection. And I want you to immediately think of that's the starting line. Now, I want you to think of the finish line. What do you want that client to realize? And now you're going to craft 3 to 5 questions that are breadcrumbs that lead to that finish line. And we even put a little rule in here, round 1 rule. The agent may only ask questions, no rebuttals, no speeches, no defending the market, then switch roles. So you're going to be switching with somebody. But this is one of the things that we actually always tell our agents in role play is don't use 20 words when 10 will do. So in other words, don't just fill in empty space with words. Calm yourself, stay patient, stay curious, and slow yourself down. Don't rush. And then last but not least is ask good open-ended questions. Something like, I use the 3% interest rate market. Okay, I said, what is your experience with purchasing in a 3% market? I didn't say, have you purchased in a 3% market? Because even if the answer is yes, if I say, have you purchased in a 3% interest rate market? And they say yes. Well, they have confidence now. They're like, yeah, I've done this before. But if you say, what was your experience purchasing in a 3% market? They may say something like, well, we were one of 15 or 20 offers. Got it. Right now you're getting them to understand like that actually wasn't an ideal scenario. We had an hour to see the house, and within 2 hours we had to submit an offer. We had to remove half of our contingencies. We had to shorten the other half. We had to, right? It's all these things, and they start to realize that actually wasn't a fun market, right? That's kind of the beauty of this. So again, just to review, the objection is the starting line. The finish line is the self-discovery that you want them to get to. And then you're going to have 3 to 5 powerful open-ended questions that help them self-realize that finish line is the best course of action for them. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.